Today, we're going to review a component of English grammar that is critical to achieving a high band score on the IELTS or any other advanced English language exam. If you've been studying for the IELTS, then you've probably noticed that the writing task rubrics include a category called Grammatical Range and Accuracy. To achieve a top band score, you'll need to use a variety of sentence structures. In today's video, we're going to cover the 4 sentence structures. Simple sentences, for example, gas prices are rising. Compound sentences, for example, we're in an economic slump and prices are still rising. Complex sentences, for example, although the economy was negatively impacted, the government promptly implemented appropriate fiscal policies. And compound complex sentences, for example, even though the economy was in recession, the government introduced a sales tax on petrol products, and voters were not happy. We'll also go over some important conjunctions that are necessary to form different types of sentences. To satisfy the Band 9 criteria on the IELTS for the Grammatical Range and Accuracy category, you need to write with an array of grammatical structures. You can't just stick to simple sentences to do well on the IELTS. What's a simple sentence? The easiest to write, of course. But specifically, they consist of one main idea, which is called an independent clause. Here are 2 examples. Gas prices are rising. The economy is experiencing a recession. In simple sentences, you have a subject that agrees with the verb or verbs in the sentence. In each of these sentences, the subject is highlighted in yellow and the verb in blue. As you can see, each sentence has just one subject and one verb. Some simple sentences might also have a compound subject. For example, gas and food are scarce these days during the recession. Gas and food are 2 separate items, but they form one subject. The verb to be, conjugated as are, matches with both gas and food. We can also have a compound predicate, which is just another way of saying 2 verbs that share the same subject. For example, electric cars are expensive and cost far more than conventional cars. Both the verbs are and cost agree with the subject electric cars. This is still a simple sentence. We must not confuse compound predicates with compound sentences. In just a moment, we'll see how a compound sentence has 2 independent clauses. In this example, there is still only one independent clause, but there are 2 verbs. 2 verbs that share the same subject is a compound predicate. As there is only one independent clause, this is still a simple sentence. Simple sentences often add clarity to our writing because they don't contain too many related ideas. But to get a high score on the IELTS, you have to use a variety of sentence structures. So, let's turn to compound sentences next. A compound sentence includes at least 2 independent clauses, usually connected using a conjunction. Let's see an example. We're in an economic slump and prices are still rising. Notice that we're in an economic slump and prices are still rising could both stand on their own as complete sentences. The conjunction in this example is the very simple word and. Here's another example. The future is unpredictable, but he's going to invest in that stock. You can see that the future is unpredictable and he's going to invest in that stock. Both could stand on their own. Therefore, they're independent clauses. The conjunction in this compound sentence is but. It connects the 2 ideas. To form compound sentences, it's useful to memorize the FANBOYS mnemonic. FANBOYS stands for F for, A and, N not, B but, O or, Y yet, and S so. Use any of these conjunctions to link the 2 independent clauses in a compound sentence. If you follow this trick, you'll have no trouble using compound sentences in your writing. Now, let's move on to complex sentences. A complex sentence includes both an independent clause and at least one subordinate clause, also called a dependent clause. Remember, an independent clause can be a complete sentence and has one main idea. A subordinate or dependent clause starts with a subordinating conjunction and can't act as a complete sentence. Let's look at an example. Even though the economy was shrinking, prices were still rising. Prices were still rising is an independent clause because it could stand on its own as a complete sentence. Even though the economy was shrinking cannot stand alone because it uses the conjunction even though, which connects the clause directly to prices were still rising. Here are a few more examples where we've highlighted the independent and subordinate clauses. Although the economy was negatively impacted, the government promptly implemented appropriate fiscal policies. Although the economy was negatively impacted is the dependent clause because it doesn't make sense standing on its own. It depends on the government promptly implemented appropriate fiscal policies to make sense. Despite the fact that it was ludicrously expensive, she decided to buy the car. Despite the fact that it was ludicrously expensive is the subordinate clause. She decided to buy the car is an independent clause because it could stand on its own as a simple sentence. To help you develop complex sentences in your writing, it's useful to practice using the most common subordinating conjunctions. A subordinating conjunction is just a fancy term for the word that connects the idea of the subordinate clause with that of the independent clause. Let's go back to our previous examples to illustrate the subordinating conjunctions in these sentences. Here, we've highlighted the subordinating conjunctions. They include even though, although, and despite. Notice that if we remove them, the sentences no longer make sense, right? None of these looks quite right. Here are some other common subordinating conjunctions. Unless, while, so that, even if, whether, as long as, in order to, until. In another related video, we will go over common linking words to help strengthen your essay writing. Click the video link here or in the description below. The last sentence structure we're going to examine is the compound complex sentence. These sentences have at least one subordinating clause and at least two independent clauses. Let's look at an example sentence to clarify. Even though the economy was in recession, the government introduced a sales tax on petrol products, and voters were not happy. In this sentence, even though the economy was in recession is the dependent clause. It cannot stand alone. On the other hand, the government introduced a sales tax on petrol products and voters were not happy are both independent clauses. Here's another sentence to analyze. The two children were playing outside today, and despite having a disagreement, they both still enjoyed their time together. The two children were playing outside today is an independent clause. Despite having a disagreement is a subordinate clause. They both still enjoyed their time together is another independent clause. So, we have two independent clauses and one subordinate clause, which is what we need for compound complex sentences. To do well on the IELTS, it's essential that your vocabulary and grammar be varied and advanced, in addition to having very few errors. In fact, even if you have 0 errors, if you only use simple sentences, you could be graded as low as a 5 on the band scale. The takeaway? To achieve a high band score, you'll need to use a variety of sentence structures. One last piece of advice before we wrap up this video. Be wary of run-on sentences and the incorrect use of commas. Let's take a quick look at a run-on sentence. We'll use an earlier example of a compound sentence from this video. We're in an economic slump and prices are still rising. If we wrote, we're in an economic slump, prices are still rising, this would be a run-on sentence. You see, a run-on sentence happens when two independent clauses are in the same sentence without any punctuations or conjunctions between them. Without any punctuation or the word and, this would be considered a run-on sentence. The clauses must be joined with either a semicolon or a conjunction. Let's look at another example to clarify. The price of gas declined, customers started driving more. In this sentence, we have two independent clauses that can stand alone: the price of gas and consumers started driving more. To fix this run-on sentence, we just need to add a comma and the word and. The price of gas declined and consumers started driving more. Just keep in mind to always join two independent clauses with appropriate punctuation and a conjunction. Now, another common error is using commas inappropriately to separate two independent clauses. Let's see an example. Gas prices are rising. The economy is experiencing a recession. This is called comma splicing. It's when a comma is used to separate two independent clauses in the same sentence. We can't do that. To fix this sentence, we can use a comma and a conjunction to separate the ideas. For example, gas prices are rising and the economy is experiencing a recession. Or simply leave both these clauses as simple sentences, separating them with a period. Gas prices are rising. The economy is experiencing a recession. The third and final way to fix a comma splice is by using a semicolon like this. Gas prices are still rising. The economy is experiencing a recession. So, when editing your written work, be sure to check for run-on sentences and comma splices. Follow these easy tips and you'll see your writing improve greatly. In summary, simple sentences have one independent clause. It offers one main idea. For example, gas prices are rising. Compound sentences have two independent clauses, joined by a FANBOYS conjunction. For example, we're in an economic slump and prices are still rising. Complex sentences have at least one subordinate clause and one independent clause. Use subordinating conjunctions to introduce the subordinating clause and connect the ideas. For example, although the economy was negatively impacted, the government promptly implemented appropriate fiscal policies. And compound complex sentences have at least one subordinating clause and at least two independent clauses. Think of these sentences as a combination of compound and complex sentences. For example, even though the economy was in recession, the government introduced a sales tax on petrol products and voters were not happy. I hope you found this video helpful. If you've enjoyed watching, give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell and share with your friends. We'd love to see you practice. Add a compound, complex sentence in the comments below, and if it needs any adjustments, we'll correct it for you. Keep practicing and good luck with your English exam.